All right. I'm popping on here again. I guess this is LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. I made a commitment this month that I was going to go live every day, 4 days a week, the month of June. So I'm keeping my commitment. And actually, I'm not even going to wait to see if anyone pops on because the replays are getting more views than the actual live these days. So today we're going to talk about emotional wellness in leadership, the challenges to emotional wellness in leadership. My name is Sharon Gill. I'm an executive leadership coach. I work with leaders and their teams, and especially their leadership team, to enhance leadership skills, improve culture, and all the soft skills that are needed in today's leadership landscape. So I also published a newsletter on here called Purpose Centered Leadership. And in February, I published an article on emotional wellness in leadership. And I want to just jump into that article and discuss three things that I had pointed out that were challenges to emotional wellness. And of course, the first one is kind of obvious, right? High stress and burnout. Now and I say that's obvious because I think they're calling this the anxious generation, right? And before it would be that, a few pockets of people would be anxious and it would be hidden. Now it seems like our entire culture, from kids who are in elementary school all the way, up to senior citizens, are having anxiety, stress, and so forth. So one of the challenges to emotional wellness in leadership is stress and burnout. And we're going to talk about some ways that we can minimize that. But it's the relentless pace, right? And the hustle and grind culture. It's the pressure that leaders face to produce and to come up with numbers. And even if you're not a publicly traded company, where Wall Street wants those numbers, even if you're a private company, just to survive, you're always looking at those numbers. And so stress and burnout is real. And we'll talk about some ways that we can minimize that. But that's one of the main challenges to emotional wellness in leadership. The second one is emotional isolation. I touched on that in the article. Leaders sometimes isolate because they don't have, whether it's a mentor or a mentor group, to really discuss their challenges with, right? Their emotions. Sometimes when we're leaders, we want to be the strong ones, right? We want to always appear like everything is happening, well, like everything is going great. And so we can be emotionally isolated because we're really just covering up stuff. Very unhealthy practice for leaders. The more evolved leaders do find themselves involved in masterminds and and other groups where leaders and CEOs are facing similar challenges can speak openly. But isolation is something I see both in secular leadership, corporate leadership, as well as even in the church, in places of faith where leaders are they're pretending that all is well and all is not well, but they don't want to appear weak. So isolation is, one of the major challenges to emotional wellness in leadership. And the third one is that I mentioned in that article was difficulty in maintaining a work-life balance. Now, I've gotten pushback, I should say, and feedback from people who said there's no such thing as work-life balance. And that's the culture of the generation right now, right? Because if the common theme is there's no such thing as work-life balance, what does that really mean? So people are saying there's no balance anymore. Well, that's a choice. That is a choice. There is work-life balance, but you have to choose to balance, your work life and your home life, your work life and your personal life. That is a choice that you as a leader should make, because when we blur those lines, that's where we're seeing more of the stress, more of the burnout. We weren't created to work 24/7. We were created to have times of rest. I mean, for heaven's sake, the scriptures even say that God rested on the seventh day, right? So there should be balance in your in your week, in your month. There should be more, there should be some white spaces on your calendar. One of the things I'd say to leaders is, when you look at your calendar and you see all these important dates, do you see a time for exercise? Do you see a time for family? Do you see a time for dating your spouse? Do you see a time for dating your kids? Have you set aside time for just self-care, for meditation? This is whatever gets scheduled gets done. And if we're not scheduling time of rest and time for self-care, especially in the high-paced world of leadership, then it never gets done. So what are some of the things that I haven't mentioned yet that could foster emotional wellness? And I'm reading the article that I have here on LinkedIn. Self-awareness and self-care. This morning, as I was doing my exercise, I have a playlist on YouTube with personal development stuff. And so the video that was on was talking about the self-care habits of the high performers. And we're talking about Tony Robbins and, et cetera, the guy from Virgin Atlantic, et cetera. And I found it interesting that all of these top performers who are hustling and grinding, they actually spend 1 to 2 hours every morning putting themselves first. They're not putting their iPhones, they're not putting their emails, they're not putting, any kind of negative energy in their space. They're putting themselves first. And some of these habits include, of course, exercise, journaling. If you're spiritual, it includes Bible reading or, some religious book, podcast, meditations. There people were meditating 45 minutes to an hour before they face the day. Because again, there's so much going on in terms of stress and stressors, that you put yourself in peak position when you put yourself first. So self-care, making sure that you have your health checkups every 6 months, making sure you're checking your blood work to see if everything is firing on all the right cylinders, checking on your diet. So self-care and being self-aware. Listen to your body. If I'm working and I'm, feel tired, I stop. I give myself that hour just so I can re-energize and regroup. Listen to your body. Be very self-aware. If anyone pops on here, you can feel free to put your name in the chat in your, in your city or your state or your country. But like I said, I'm just, going through here. Building supportive networks. I mentioned before that the leaders who isolate is because they do not have a supportive network. They don't belong to a mastermind. They don't belong to any type of group. But it is important to build a supportive network, to network with people who are even a little bit ahead of where you're at. People who are your peers and people who are a little bit ahead, who can tell you, success leaves clues, who can tell you, who you can discuss some of your challenges with, right? Some of your, failures with, because I will tell you that they would have failed also. And so sometimes we are going through a certain situation and we feel embarrassed by it. We feel like a failure, that old imposter syndrome there. But when you talk to people who are ahead of you, you will recognize, you will hear that they themselves have also been through that particular fire. So building a supportive network. And I would say, don't just talk to people in your own network. Don't just talk to people in your own industry. Talk to people outside of your industry. I was on a mastermind call. I just got off one. And it was just interesting hearing the perspective of other people. They're not coaches, they're not consultants, not all of them. They're doctors, they're different folks. But the way how they view a problem, how they view life, it's just good to get that perspective. So building supportive networks. Again, I touched on this before, but setting boundaries. Setting boundaries. It is in your control. There is a balance between work and life. Setting proper boundaries. What gets scheduled gets done. What is on your calendar? Is your calendar wall to wall with things that you must do? That is not sustainable. That is not good for the emotional well being of a leader or for anyone. So, setting boundaries, because one of the things I set a boundary years ago that I would not do a certain kind of work on a Friday. I just feel like Friday is when I need to start going into slow down mode. Now, I can choose to use that day to network with people, but lighter lifting. That's my boundary. So if a client says to me, I need you to work every Friday, I would have to say no. I'd have to make less because I want to be my best self as a leader, as a coach, as a consultant to my client. And if I don't set those boundaries for myself, I am no good to someone else. So you need to know, what are your boundaries? Set boundaries, stand on your boundaries, and people will respect your boundaries. Two more. Continuous learning and development. Invest in personal development. So as a leader, you think to yourself, why do I need to develop more? I'm a leader. That's when you need to develop more. The landscape is changing rapidly. We have AI, we have people quiet quitting, we have high burnout, there's so much going on. So, make sure that as a leader, you are investing in your own growth. One of the things I work with leaders to do is to enhance those soft skills, communication skills, especially just that self-awareness, soft skills like empathy, soft skills, like I said, self-awareness, communication, team building, team development, organizational culture, improving on that. But definitely, of course, taking a look at your leadership skills, because there's leadership is always evolving. The leadership skills that worked years ago no longer necessarily work in today's multi-generational work environment. So continuous learning and development. And the last one, which I think is important, is to promote a culture of wellness. So this may sound pretty bad, but fish rots at the head, they say, right? So what does that mean? It means that the tone of the organization is set by the leader, the guy or the gal at the top. So if you're in a turn and burn lifestyle, hustle and grind, which again, some leaders believe that they have to do, well, that's going to be the culture that you're setting and the tone that you're setting. And if you're not taking care of yourself as a leader, if you're burnt out and stressed, barking commands, maybe, feeling ill, well, that's going to be the tone that you're setting for your organization. But you could set a tone where you are encouraging your employees to have morning routines, for example, to take care of self. You can offer as one of your benefits self-care days, maybe 2 or 3 a year, self-care days, showing your team that you care for them, you care about their mental health, well-being, making sure that the insurance that you're offering your employees covers things like mental health. And giving people a mental health day, maybe once or twice a year, just so they can just be. And so setting that culture in your organization is a wonderful way for you to promote emotional wellness in yourself as a leader, as well as emotional wellness in your team. All right, that's it for today. If you guys are watching on the replay, go ahead and leave me your comments. Love for you to share if this blesses you. Again, I'm Sharon Gill. I'm an executive leadership coach. I work with leaders, they're emerging leaders, and their leadership team to enhance culture, enhance soft skills, and just customize coaching for what you need. All right, until next week, take care.